here on Being a Woman, we talk about relationships and dating often, and today is definitely no different.
Yeah, so during this pandemic, authors Erika McCall and Nisha Forbes, well, they interviewed 30 women and 20 men all about their most ridiculous relationship misadventures. And they put them all into a book, and it's called All Good Just a Week Ago, Funny Dating Stories to Help You Keep Your Head in the Game.
And I have that book right here. The duo says that you'll laugh, roll your eyes, and shake your head throughout the entire book. Here to tell us about it is co-author Erika McCall. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, ladies. How are you?
Good.
Doing well.
All right, so let's get to this first question. What inspired you and Nisha to write this book during quarantine?
Well, Naisha and I, we were inspired to write this book because we have so many crazy dating stories that we once cried about that we can now actually laugh about. And we have lots of friends who have similar stories. So we were like, why not put this in a book so people can know that we are on this journey together?
I love it. And you guys go through so many real scenarios that so many women and men, for that matter, deal with crazy stuff while dating. So you interviewed 50 people. How did you go about weeding through what stories you wanted to use, or how you chose the people, including men, for this book?
First we were about to just write a book where it was going to be only women. And as we got a lot of stories from women, we really just recruited our friends that we knew had funny stories. And then word got out that we were looking for stories. It wasn't too hard to find too many crazy dating stories. And then we realized, you know what, men have similar stories too. A lot of dating books are marketed towards single women. And, some of them can be male bashing, or they don't really include men on the conversation. So that process was very interesting, but we really just solicited our friends, and it was a crazy time creating this book because a lot of people didn't want to type their stories out. They actually want to voice record them. So we had to transcribe, like we were a court reporter, transcribe these stories and eventually, create a book.
And I feel like with this book, I just started reading it, and it is so worth it. It just dropped 3 days ago, and so far from reading it, it's definitely worth every single penny. So it covers everything from dating married men, okay? It's happened to us girls, and to dramatic age differences and so much more. So what is your favorite story?
Oh my goodness, there's so many stories that are my favorite. But one of my favorite is in the Giggles chapter, where it's a young lady. She goes on a date and she gets very sick while she's Netflixing and chilling. She had went to a barbecue before her date, and then they went out for sushi, and she got really sick while they were watching a movie, and she went to the bathroom and threw up all over this guy's bathroom wall.
Yikes. How'd that end?
And she's trying to clean it up, and she's just like, oh my gosh, she couldn't hide it. She got so sick, and he was so nice about it. He's like, that's okay, I'll have my clean it on Monday. And then they actually went out on another date after that.
Wow.
So I love it.
Wow.
Embarrassing, but they still went out on another date.
That is super embarrassing. But that says a lot about him, that he took it in stride, and he was just like, you know what, no big deal. I still want to date you, so I mean, we all have those crazy, crazy stories. You guys say that the book, of course, is good for single people. And one of the reasons you were talking about earlier, Lauren, is that it provides solutions for folks as well. Talk about that and why single people can benefit from reading this.
Yeah, so we provide solutions, we provide commentary. So the whole idea is to share these stories so everybody does not have to go through them. Hopefully they can learn from all of these experiences, but we provide commentary and we share solutions. So as we were writing the book, we just found a greater purpose, and we talk about a concept called kingdom dating, where we talk about what if we went into relationships really understanding the purpose for our lives. How different, how amazing would that be?
Right.
I love that. What would you say is one of the biggest lessons that you have learned from one of your craziest dating experiences?
Well, my lesson personally, because I noticed a pattern while writing this book. We both noticed a pattern. It's very interesting because Naisha's married and I'm single. And she was able to notice her patterns leading up to meeting her husband. And I noticed that I've gone from situationship to situation.
Yes.
Relationships don't really have a label. You do everything like you're in a relationship and there's no commitment. Like that was my life. And after writing this book and after having these discussions, I said, there's no way that I can go back to the same dating relationships after writing this book. So it even spoke to me during this process. So it's been very valuable because now I have something holding me accountable.
Oh, for
Ooh,
sure.
I like that. I really like that. Situationships are dangerous.
Oh, yes, they are. And we're going to get more into that right after this break. Erika is staying right here with us. So stay with us on Being a Woman. All right, so we're back with co-author of All Good just a week ago, a book full of crazy dating stories from both men and women. All right, so Erika, I want to talk about this one story. It's in the beginning of the book. It's the smooth operator, you know, Papi Chulo, okay? And I feel like we've all had that person that, you know, you date them, your first date, oh, he took her to church and everything like this, and it was just like great, and then you saw all these red flags in the beginning. So why was that so important to have that story first? Because that really grabbed me into this book.
Because as women, we see all of these signs and we ignore the red flags. And it was so important to add that story because that's one of the stories that Naisha and I really crack up about, because it's like, you really thought this was your person, and there were so many red flags. And she can be very dramatic at times. So like, you know, there are many times when she'd be like, you know, I think I met the one, I think I So we had to include that story because we ignore the red flags that are already there. Like you saw in the story, like, you know, he was not working. He didn't even have a cell phone.
Living with his mom.
So yes, that is a story that everybody asks about Papi Chulo.
And I have to ask, Papi Chulo, where'd that name come from? Why did you guys decide to name him Papi Chulo?
That was actually a nickname she gave him. So we are very keen on nicknames. Everybody gets a nickname who's like to us in our phone. And that was his nickname at the time. It was Papi Chulo.
Okay, speaking of red flags, we got to get into our own dating mishaps. Oof, I don't even want to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it. Okay, so I was in a situationship.
Okay.
On and off, long distance for several years. This was like right out of college, and met this guy, and it was just a mess. And there were so many red flags. He didn't have a job. The entire, 5 years or so that we were in this situationship. Yeah, didn't have a job. Lied about that. Lied about his child. Lied about everything. I paid for like dates and trips. It was a mess.
Wow.
A mess. I'm so embarrassed to even talk about it.
But that's okay. You learn from it.
Just a few weeks ago, he started following me on social media. I'm just like, dude, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Yeah.
Wow. He's operator. That's a smooth operator because it's like all these red flags, but they're smooth, they're fine, So you see these red flags, but then you see them in person, and you interact with them, and you're just mesmerized sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like for me, my story, and I'm not going to go too into it, but this was basically my senior year in college. Met this guy who was on the same team as me. He had a girlfriend, wasn't into him. He ends up breaking up with his girlfriend for me, but he still has his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend still there. So even when we're dating. And that still happens throughout. And then basically, I kind of latched on. It was a situationship for like a year and a half. And then by the time that it ended, he ended up getting his ex-girlfriend pregnant. And now, we're here. But I really thought he was the one. He was so good on paper.
We always think they're the one. Why is
he
that?
He was so good on paper.
A story like that is called Baby Bye. Dating somebody, and he's like, I got something to tell you. Ooh. And so that's why we wanted to put all of these stories, because like we've all experienced this, and sometimes it could be hard to continue on that dating path to meet your person, all because of these crazy stories, but it's part of our journey.
And that's what it is. It's part of the journey. And I feel like with these, like Venice touched on earlier, it's those solutions.
Yes.
Like you say like, okay, this is the story, and like you explain this situation, but then you explain how you can get past it, what you've learned from it. Again, beginning of the book, you're talking about red flags. That's so important because that a lot of times you see these red flags in the beginning, like in Smooth Operator. You know, she's realized, you know, he lived with his mom, didn't really talk about his job, but she's like, but he's so nice. He went to church with me.
We make
and,
excuses.
You know, we make
for
all
them.
these excuses. And why do you think it's so important to show every single aspect of, you know, different people's dating lives?
Yeah, I think it's very important because in a lot of dating books, people just give one perspective and they give, just all of these rules, but everybody has a different path to meeting their person. You don't know what you're supposed to learn on that journey. So it's very important for us to get different perspectives because someone might not relate to my story. Like my story is about situationship. Somebody else might relate to the red flag story. So it was important just to get different perspectives and say, hey, we all go through all of these crazy things. And one thing that I do love about the book is after each section, because it's divided into 3 sections. The first section is, the ladies share their stories. And the second section, the men share their stories. But at the end of each section, we share how I met my husband and how I knew she was mine. Speaking of which, today is my parents' 38th anniversary. So I have to now.
Love that.
But yeah, so it was just important to get all of these perspectives so we can not just create a book, but create a conversation, a real conversation. We're hoping that people will come together, grab their wine, grab a book, and have conversations because somebody else, we gave our commentary in the book, but someone else might have another take on some of the things that happened. Like my dad has his own take on our stories. He's absolutely crazy. So of course he wants to chime in and give his dad advice. So everybody join in on the conversation. That's why we said, you can be single in a relationship or married. In our community, especially the Black community, our communities need to be healed, and that starts with healing our relationships.
Yes, I love that.
I love that
Having
so
that
much.
conversation and the different perspectives. That's what I love, that there were also men's stories in there as well, because we talk about these things with our girlfriends.
Right.
We get together, we have some wine, we go to dinner, we're talking about all this stuff, but sometimes we don't hear the man's side of these dating horrors. So this is wonderful.
Oh, for sure. So we got to get to it. Where can viewers go and purchase this lovely book, and how much is it retailing for?
Okay, so you can go to allgoodjustaweekago.com. It's available anywhere you can purchase a book online, but go to allgoodjustaweekago.com because it supports the publishing company, which I created. It's called Don't Wait, Create LLC. So it's the first book coming out of it. And the paperback that you all have in your hands, it's $22.99. But right now we have limited edition hardcover copies for $25, but I think there's only a few of them left.
Oh.
I don't have more in my hands, but those are online as well. So those are $25, and it's hardcover, which we were so excited about because as independent authors, like if you're self-published, it's hard to get a hardcover, and that was so important.
No, I love it. I feel like it's worth it because I can't wait. This is what I am going to be reading this week in Erica. I got past the first story, but I'm ready for more. This is just everything.
Yeah, juicy details, all of that. Bring us all back to our dating mishaps. But I love the book, and we're looking forward to reading it for sure.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your support, ladies.
No, thank you so much for joining us. And again, sharing your stories. Yeah. This is really what's going to help us to continue to grow as Black women and just continue to just prosper and learn from our past mistakes.
Yes.
We are going to change the narrative. And I don't know, what your stories are, but we're going to change the narrative. As Black women, they always want us to know, like, how many of us have yet to be married and why. We are changing that narrative. So hopefully you can draw some inspiration, and please share it with your friends.
All right. Thank you so much, Erica, for being with us and sharing this book with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.